I spent 30 plus years in the US intelligence community. I have done everything throughout my intelligence career.
This content is like an episode form where we will explore the intersection of security, global mobility, and the digital transformation of immigration. I'm Theodora Jantol from the Passport Investor, an investment migration consultant, and today I'm joined by a truly unique voice in the security field, Charles Russo.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here. So just a real quick background. I spent 30 plus years in the U.S. intelligence community, having retired from the Federal Bureau of Investigation as an intelligence analyst. I have done everything from throughout my intelligence career, everything from complex financial crimes, so healthcare fraud, mortgage fraud, securities, bank fraud, wire fraud, all the way through counterterrorism. And so a big part of everything that it encompasses is cybersecurity, which is, I would never say it's just a national problem. It is an international problem when it comes to anything that we are doing. So I also teach online at the college level, everything from undergraduate all the way to doctoral studies in criminal justice, intelligence, national security, homeland security. Again, a big component of almost every single discipline and curriculum is a cyber domain or cybersecurity um, aspect.
Yes, very interesting. So, from your perspective, how does the idea of border security evolve over the last 10 years?
Oh, that is a really great question. Border security really is no longer just about physical fences or checkpoints. It's now about firewalls, encryption, access control. And that access control includes like our multi factor authentication. 10 years ago, the focus was really on who crossed a physical border. Today, it's also about their data that crosses digital thresholds. So cybersecurity really has become integral to modern immigration, visa processing, refugee systems, and digital identity checks. Borders have gone from being geographic lines to digital perimeters.
But do you think that every border is that secure, or do certain countries have better cybersecurity at the borders than others?
Uh, in my humble opinion, no country throughout the globe has a better system than the other. No one has figured out how to magically ensure that the digital border is not breached. They can work on, just like here we have a new administration in the United States who has cut our illegal physical immigration from 100% uh, open border to now a 99.1% closed border. But that digital threshold will, especially when it comes to visa fraud, still illegal immigration, even the refugee systems we're seeing with even individuals from Iraq and Afghanistan, where we had unfortunate conflicts for 20 plus years. Um, Even with Ukraine, we brought individuals in, and we're finding out well after individuals with not so great backgrounds or other financial issues that they've brought along with them. So, it does transcend the physical and the digital. And I just don't think that I could say that there's one country that has a best practice. I wish that they would all talk more to really have that. We've seen a lot of European Union countries going back to a physical border, because the old system that they've had in place for 20 years, 30 years, they're seeing that it just hasn't been as protective within their sovereign nation, if you will, from say illegal immigration.
So would you say that in this case, then, if a person has multiple passports, he can just switch the passports and the system will not recognize it?
Yes, that continues to be a major issue. And I know that for the United States, that too was an issue of being a dual, what they call a dual citizen, having those dual passports. I mean, you have, Hollywood actors and actresses who have been long time actors, and yet they are not U.S. citizens. Let's take Mel Gibson for at least this is something that we can say everybody probably knows who Mel Gibson is, and he's been born in Australia. We know him from the 1970s Mad Max films, all the way up to current day, and yet he is not a U.S. citizen. He has, even though he was born here at an early age, he moved back to Australia, and so his parents had gotten him an Australian passport, not a U.S. So he always runs into certain problems with the bureaucracy that is the U.S. immigration system and citizenship. But then now you have others who have dual citizen, and yes, when something happens, they just change passports, and that too continues for at least all I can talk on mostly as US, but even some of our partners in Canada and Central and South America, Mexico, where they do have multiple passports. And that is an issue because of also name variations, as you probably know. We struggle with that here in the US. People can change their name because maybe it's very difficult to say and they want to Americanize it, and they have that option. And so it can gum up the system, if for a lack of a better term.
Yeah, interesting. And what did surprise you the most when cybersecurity began intersecting with the immigration system?
Yeah, that was with everything innovation and technology, it has a very long lag time to catch up with any kind of regulation, policy, and laws. What surprised me the most is how unprepared many immigration systems were for such things as cyber intrusion. We really look at immigration infrastructure, which was built for bureaucracy, not for resilience, which you and I, as just citizens of countries, we expect it more to be about resilience of, you know, here's, I want to either immigrate or I want to go visit, and there becomes this bureaucracy. I kind of look at in a study right now that I'm looking at is the United Kingdom has now implemented its UKA. And whereas an American citizen getting ready this year to go visit parts of the United Kingdom, I had to pay 10 pound, 12 US dollars.
We
Uh,
all, everybody who has visa-free access has to register before.
Yes, and it's, I understand it's getting ready for who's coming in, and I've heard a lot of friends and colleagues who also have been going to visit Ireland and Scotland and the UK, that oh, it's a money grab, and part of it is, no, they're starting to really understand there is still part of a bureaucracy, but it also is a measure of finding out who is coming into the country. And of course, they're offsetting that cost of monitoring with that. So part of me is saying, okay, now that over the last 10 years, I could see a lot of countries being unprepared. Now I start to see, at least like the United Kingdom, they're trying to get prepared. So the sheer volume of sensitive personal data, like our biometrics, our travel history, financial profiles, is really a gold mine for the hackers. I understand governments need to have the data of the biometrics, the travel histories, and even getting into your financials, in trying to do any real travel, say from the United States to Canada. The Canadian customs, they have kind of that "why are you here?" And they really want to know. Unlike when you come here to the United States, a lot of our customs were are asking that same question, but it almost seems a rehearsed and repeated, to where there's not a sense of really understanding of, why you're really coming here, uh, whether it's for nefarious purposes, or is it just, yeah, personal travel, business. Um, but we're still not looking at the hackers. We're still, I mean, that can be done from anywhere in the world. But what happens when you have an individual who has skills that can, within proximity, really have the ability to wreak havoc on a system? I mean, yet many agencies, were still operating on legacy systems. Ours here in the United States continues. We have had Doge, um, which is that Department of Government Efficiency, has been finding out that even our own uh, customs and immigration are still working on those systems from the 1970s and the 80s. The attack surface really is a lot wider than really I think anybody has anticipated. Have we closed that gap for any kind of digital espionage? I can honestly say no. I don't feel that we have closed that gap, and so I really do think that governments are not working as quickly because, going back to my first statement, policies, regulations, and laws have a lot longer to catch up with the technology.
Mhm. Yeah, it takes more time to introduce these new laws, and in the meantime, the technology has advanced in a significantly faster way.
Yes.
And what do you think? What kind of cyber threats target these immigration and citizenship databases? You said already that it's a gold mine for hackers.
Wow. Really good question. And I would say that's everything from ransomware to data exfiltration. We've seen credential stuffing attacks, insider threats, and even nation state espionage targeting visa systems. So the goal really is often identity theft, it's blackmail, or it's even manipulation of the migration flows for geopolitical leverage. And I'm talking about, yes, a lot is what we've seen in the, in the media here, even in the United States, to support that kind of understanding of the threats.
So we've seen already hacks into travel visa systems, and I mean, in worst case scenarios, what can happen if somebody breaks into these systems besides just identity theft and getting all kinds of information about somebody? I mean, on the biggest possible scale, what's the worst thing that can happen?
Oh, if a visa database is compromised, not only are identities can they be faked or stolen, but entire national security systems become undermined. That's huge. And when I say national security systems, you also have to think about the allies, the information sharing. So again, I'm going to take it from my standpoint here in the United States, that we work with. We also have our Transportation Safety Administration, the TSA, that after 9/11, these are the physical checks that you go through. But they also share with other country law enforcement, to include our own FBI, and other national law enforcement and intelligence community partners, who's coming in and out. You think about that, just doesn't undermine national security of one nation. It has a ripple effect. Again, I'll be traveling this year. I'm giving my secret away. That I'm going to be traveling to Europe again, and with the database that I had to put in, of course, I've already bought my airline tickets, so at least the U.S. knows where I'm traveling and when. But they've already shared that with the countries that I'm landing in. And I think that's a good thing. But you think about that amount of information that's personally identifiable, a name, date of birth, address, phone numbers, email addresses, and then what resides online as well transcends borders. So border agents now just completely rely on that data to make real time decisions whether to allow or deny access to a country. If it's tampered with, you could see unauthorized entries, diplomatic fallouts, or even delayed crisis responses due to the fact of corrupted data. And then you're talking about the monetary. We haven't even gotten into that. You're talking, there's a lot of issues with financial systems that are just not national, they're global, they're international partners. So all these, and the visa systems have a lot to do with that as well, because with your banking systems of different countries have uh, safeguards, but at the same time, those safeguards are plugged into whether you're a citizen, whether you're visiting, whether you are a dual citizen. And so therefore banking systems can really feel it as well.
Do you think that countries should treat digital border protection as part of the national defense?
Absolutely. Digital borders are national borders now. I mean,
Yes.
let that sink in. It's digital borders are really national borders now. Securing them should be a core responsibility of any modern national defense strategy. I mean, here in the US, it's been talked about. You hear that phrase of, our economics, especially in the midst of this tariff and trade war, with this new administration and the big focus on China, that the buzzwords seem to be defense and strategies. This includes active threat hunting, penetration testing, and of course, cyber wargaming. We used to just think of a battlefield being a physical location. And yeah, in the last 20, 25 years, we've thought about the cyber domain, and how that really is affecting the financial systems, energy systems. But I think that when it comes to national defense, it brings on a more broad aspect.
Yeah. Is there an institution that manages all the cyber defense globally?
You know, no.
No.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. And
I mean, considering that this is like a niche within the defense industry, like there must be some kind of institution to manage all of that somehow.
NATO and the United Nations, they're the entities that have this global outreach, and they are trying to work within the cyber domain. And you think about countries that are not as savvy, or their infrastructure. if you will, is not as robust. The European Union has its own cyber domain entities. Yes, they do communicate just like we had for the last 50 something years um, with Interpol. That was the international police, that's how you could send out red notices and for extradition of criminals to be brought to justice from one country to the next. But there is not one central. Should there be? I have mixed, feelings on should there be or should there not be. Because if you put your eggs in all in one basket, that's a single point of failure. It only takes what they call a 0 day to happen with that. So, I hope that I'm able to have shed some light on, you do have within defense, NATO is a significant part, but that not every country on the globe is part
Yeah.
of NATO. Not every country participates or has the infrastructure to participate in the United Nations. Um, and you see dissension within the European Union as well, especially with the GDPR. Um, and it's instituting on how cybersecurity is going to be allowed of what it can and cannot do, and it doesn't allow for national defense. So it kind of cuts off, and it's only for really consumer, not for a national security or national defense aspect.
Mm, interesting. Now, just looking how to connect this with my industry, what do you think that investment migration programs could do to build stronger cyber protocols within their due diligence? We do perform due diligence for every investor, but politically, there are still concerns regarding every program.
Well, one is conducting any kind of regular cyber audit. Here in the US, we are really far behind on trained, knowledgeable, highly educated cybersecurity analysts. There's such a huge push because the cyber audits are just not a check in the box. It's really about how enforcing multi factor authentication, the encrypting data at rest, meaning it's not being transmitted, it's just sitting, say, on a server or hard drive. But is it encrypted enough that if it's just sitting and not being transmitted, and in order to be intercepted, is an audit enough? Working with third party cybersecurity consultants, I think more and more individuals and companies do put in place hiring consultants. Not having the consultants has shown, over the last 10 years here in the US, we've had attacks like on an oil pipeline. We've had even a meat packing distribution plant that they didn't have audits, they didn't have consultants. Well, not having that due diligence, it ended up really hurting them. So due diligence should always include vetting digital infrastructure, not just financial profiles. Um, and I think having that in some kind of migration program
Mhm.
is really something that needs to be thought about. And it goes back to what you had asked earlier about, well, what about individuals who have multiple passports? Is there a place that is a repository that would help improve programs to ensure that any kind of investment, because we're talking about financials, that money moving, is it moving to the right people? Is it coming from here in the US after 9/11? We had anytime you go to do a big loan or a home loan, you have to sign a paper saying that no, none of the funds are coming from nefarious activities like terrorism. You're not trying to do anything. Yes, to me, that's just words. But how are they going to really be able to support it, prove it? Well, that takes an audit. So, does a program within a country that allows investment migration and having a program, do they have these audits, not just for the data, but for the financials as well?
Well, there are certain companies that do very thorough background checks, including also forensic accounting for certain individuals that are considered being of a high risk. It's not just in investment migration, it's every person that is on a higher position or getting into politics or getting into another high position. He has to prove himself to be clean, that his background is clean. And then certain companies do this kind of forensic accountings, background checks, just to prove that everything is in check.
Yep.
And it can be very hard if somebody is looking into the past of a person 30 years ago, because 30 years ago the technology was not like today.
No.
Nobody has receipts from the 90s.
No, and you bring up something that is, those are still to me some vulnerabilities in programs, because if you think about having individuals doing backgrounds, again, it's also what did they do if they're thinking nefarious activities, not so good. They can do a scrub of, if, especially if they have hackers. There is not one system that is ever built that's not vulnerable. Um, Anything dealing with computer code is vulnerable. You got to remember, the bad people have 24/7. They have the ability to work within the dark web on a transnational global scale. You have whole government, nation state organizations that employ people to do nothing but try to figure out how to get into any and every system, because that data. So I always still worry about doing background investigations. We're going to have gaps in information because, yep, the technology, just as we found out here in the US recently, that retiree program for federal workers is still done by paper. Um, and here, yet, we're in this cyber domain. We have AI, and you have to be worrying about the deep fakes as well,
Yes.
because not just documents but photos, everything can be doctored, they can be looked at, that metadata can be even spoofed, of saying where that picture was taken, to make it look all real. And it has private investigators, whole firms here, who are, as you had even said, there are whole companies that's all that they do. They can still be spoofed even with being done the due diligence.
Well, this is quite worrying.
I
But
don't
I'm
mean to
sure
be.
it would be interesting data for certain individuals that might try to become that high level of hackers.
Yeah.
Could you perhaps walk us through a hypothetical attack scenario targeting one of the citizenship by investment or residency by investment programs?
Okay. I want to start off with kind of a scenario. So picture this: a threat actor compromises an agent portal. So, say a country's investment migration programs portal, because there's weak login protections. So they download applications, they forge identities using synthetic biometrics, they insert fake, high net worth individual data into the system. Later, those citizens could access visa free travel, open shell companies, launder funds under assumed identities. It's espionage and it's economic subversion all rolled into one. It sounds James Bondish, but
Yes.
that's the world we live in. And I think that, again, looking at programs, there are countries that are ready for this. Can I say my own country
Yes.
still has vulnerabilities, but there's a lot of European Union countries that, because you've been living in for 30, 40 years of the EU and having that visa free travel, they've been geared towards that ability to understand that the hypothetical attack may have already become reality.
But what are the chances of something like that actually happening for the purpose of getting new identities and new passports?
Oh, it's the probability is 100%. Again, well, I don't want to sound all doom and gloom. I'm a skeptic when it comes to anything computer, anything digital, if you will. Um, Again, we're relying, even humans, we make mistakes. Why do you think we have spies? Because other people will, they want to impart some kind of information it's a quid pro quo. Um, and there are individuals, hackers, that start off at a very young age. They were born in the computer age. I'm a 70s child. I didn't touch a computer until I was 18 years old. And that was just because it was a typing class. It really was not until my mid 20s that I really started to understand digital, the zeros and the ones. So nobody is immune, um, from having any kind of real privacy, if you will. Um, every system has its vulnerability. That's the reason that we've set apart multi-factor authentication, sometimes 2 and 3 levels, which I think is great. But things are still not foolproof because humans, we write down passwords. Phones can be spoofed now. It only takes someone a moment to get near your phone and they can actually clone it. So even if you have multi-factor authentication like Duo or RSA tokens, they can still be vulnerable to an attack. So there is a level of trust. I think that doing a lot more face to face interactions, even through Zoom, um, will have its vulnerabilities, but you go back to that face to face interaction, and there's less likelihood of real issues.
Yes. So, but in terms of citizenship, if we compare how it was done before, just based on paperwork, and now when everything is digital, my personal opinion is that now forging data is a lot more difficult than before.
Yeah. I would also look at it. One would think, because we went from a paper base, having to send in a photograph with everything written out, waiting for entities like banks to send, information from their headquarters to, say, a program to where a person could, put the file together, could take months, if not years. you would expect that the data that we can transmit digitally would speed things up. But does that mean that due diligence is being done, um, and new questions are being asked? That to me, are the US system still is, why are people waiting 25 years to get a citizenship, doing it the right way? I love what this administration is doing with the gold cards. The expectation is up to 2,000 gold cards are going to possibly be purchased this year alone. I mean, that's what, $2 or $3 billion. Is it buying citizenship? I don't think so. I still think that the data that, because that was part of some of the naysayers to it, of, well, if I have a couple of $1 million, I can buy my citizenship. Well, you're not buying it. You're still investing. You're still having that data collection is still being done. And I think the more that we do it, we're setting up a digital architecture that really will still ensure jurisdictions, like, say, whether it's a country or it's a uh, conglomerate, European Union, they're still going to require data sovereignty. So, I mean, I know I'm kind of getting into the digital privacy aspect, but when we start looking at governments who want high net worth individuals, I don't think that it's overstepping digital privacy. I think that the data is still going to be sovereign. It's still going to reside and be governed within that host nation.
Yes, it is their right to protect the data of their citizens. Um, but you mentioned something a minute ago. It's not just buying a passport, it's investing. And once all these background checks are done and you are proven to be clean, then you can be allowed to invest and to get a citizenship. So it's not just, I'm going to come here and I'm going to give you money and you give me the passport. No, you have to qualify for it, not just with the money.
Yes, and I think that is the misconception of individuals who don't know enough about investment migration, that they do have this because of the wording, well, investment and migration, that when they really have to look at it, that yes, if you want to go to or have access to a country or a nation, that they get to say who comes in, and there is that, yes, net worth. What are you bringing to us? Because we're seeing globally the unfortunate open borders of what it does do to societies and cultures. We want to be able to protect those, and I think having that, the financial stability as well. I think that's when we start talking about finances of a country. They want people who just aren't going to, like you said, just going to put money down and say, give me a passport. What are you going to be able to do for us as a, whether you're an individual entrepreneur, business? I, like myself, am an educator. So if I were to, and I look forward to, yes, being able to bring my, say, 30 plus years experience doing intelligence analysis, but it's more than just state secrets. It's how you think, and new perspectives. And does a country want me, or would I be a good asset to that country to come in and say, well, I want to be able to teach at one of your universities. I want to be a part of your economy. So I think having that due diligence of someone's background, that they could look at mine and go, okay, you did this in a background, but what are you doing lately? I think that has a big, and like you, I'm out there on the internet. I am on LinkedIn. I'm on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. I have nothing to hide. There's nothing nefarious. Um, but again, I think coming back to the investment, they have to protect themselves by doing the due diligence, the backgrounds, not just accepting money for a return and passport. There's still that why it takes so long is that due diligence.
Yeah, they have to protect the program and
Integrity is everything. And
the reputation of the country.
yeah.
You also mentioned looking into a person, how that person can contribute to a country, which reminds me of a number of citizenship by exceptions that have been done. It's usually when countries do reward exceptional individuals for some kind of service or an achievement, when they want to make somebody their citizen because of the things that person can bring to that country. Yeah. So I hope that you will be a good candidate for one of the countries.
Yeah, and I think that that says something that it I just look at myself as just Joe Schmo, right? I am not somebody like a celebrity, but when countries do that, that here is somebody that has exceptionalism in science or education or finance or economics, or even yes, we could say Hollywood celebrities. Um, to me, that's also part of understanding that this country is open and it sends that message. We want these types of people. Um, and I'm not trying to say derogatory towards others who don't reach, say, a certain level, but it's because not everybody can invest. They don't have that, freedom, that financial freedom to be able to say, well, okay, I want to invest here because, well, I love. I mean, gosh, I absolutely last year went on a Danube cruise, first time in the Eastern Balkans, and not one, between um, Romania all the way up to Hungary. We wish we could have kept going up into Austria and Germany, but our time was short. We could see, my spouse and I could actually see us settling in some of these towns and what we could bring as individuals. So I think that when countries or nations have the exceptional programs, they're also trying to advertise that, see, this individual is here. I mean, George Clooney and his wife live in Italy. I absolutely love Italy. I mean, my ancestry is from Sicily, and so I've always dreamed of being able to go there. Now, if they were to have a program for exceptional, I do have a bloodline, but I'm still under the. It takes a while because yes, I have to show a lot of paperwork. I have to do that. It's not just saying, "Well, let me in. Here's some money to pay," to let me in. I still think that countries and nations do that in order to show, see, they have something for everyone.
Yes. It is a way to reward exceptional people. And if we would look at the map of all the countries that actually have legally citizenship by exception, it's quite a significant part of the world.
Wow.
And since you love the Balkans, I have to mention that Johnny Depp is our citizen in Serbia, and Steven Seagal.
Wow, those are things I did not know.
Now you know.
Learn every day.
What advice would you give to jurisdictions and agents that handle sensitive client data? Now we're getting back to the data talk.
Mm, encrypt everything. um, There are so many. Again, everything is technology based, right? But there are hardware as well as software that you can utilize to encrypt, shield, and protect everything. So you treat your own CRM like a bank vault, right? There's not one individual who has one password. Um, there's no single point of failure. You want to segment data access by roles. So whether you're using a Windows system or a OSI like a Mac, and you have a network or you have a um, business page, you want to segment or partition individual roles within, say, companies. Even if it's a small company and there's two of you, um, the hardware, there's now encryption keys that, while yes, you can log into your system, you have to also have an encryption key or a common access card. And then it will still ask you for another multi-factor authentication. So again, it's layered, because that encryption, you always want to keep up with encryption. Even emails, I would say these days, we don't encrypt it, or we just rely on the default of your Outlook, so on and so. I would suggest going in and asking for that higher level encryption. We just continue to rely on what's called public key infrastructure, PKI. You want to avoid public Wi-Fi, train stations, airports, when they have open free Wi-Fi. Um, here in the U.S., the largest hacking comes from within Starbucks, because Starbucks has an open Wi-Fi. They actually advertise for people to come in. Why would you ever want to, one, log in on an open Wi-Fi that doesn't require any kind of login, multi-factor authentication that you only know? But imagine now working on your client data and someone having access to what we've been talking about already, is that personally identifiable information. That high, does somebody want to know that your client is a high net worth billionaire? No, you don't want that. Um, you got to train not only yourself but others on phishing awareness, those phishing scams, the emails that come through that look like
Oh
they're from a
yes, we
friend,
all get these emails.
and we all get them. But do you know that people still fall for those? Because most breaches start with that human click. People still turn around and go, "Oh, wait, there's an attachment I was waiting for from her. I'm going to click on it," and next thing you know, they have access.
Yes, we have to be careful. I got one of those emails recently, but it sounded very fishy, and the language that was used was very general. I guess it was an email sent out to thousands of people. It did not exactly describe me, but thank you for trying to blackmail me.
No, but that's the thing. Someone doesn't actually need you to do something. They can spoof your email
But
address,
it
and
was
it
just
ruins
like
people.
a random general blackmail letter regarding things that have nothing to do with me. So,
And while deep fakes now are even more commonplace, deep fake not only photos but voices. We can take what we're talking about today, that we're recording or that we're talking over the internet, and someone just needs these recordings, and they can, within moments, AI can turn this into a individual that you would say you're representing. This is part of that identity theft. It's no longer just someone stealing a name, um, a passport number, date of birth, and an address, and being able to go get a credit card. Now it's, in programs for benefits that they can have access to.
But are biometric systems getting used to the threat AI presents?
Yeah, I mean, the biometric systems for more government and commercial use is definitely within the sci-fi realm. um, retinal scans, and actually, yes, voice and analysis, because it being recorded can't necessarily always sort out or filter out background noise. It can tell that it was done on a microphone device, uh, going up to the door and saying, "My voice is my password," which sounds cliche, but there still are government entities that have that. They use your retina. You cannot replicate a retina, even through a video or a deep fake. So there are those being used. Uh, Fingerprints still to this day, I think, are underutilized, for everything from identity theft to even travel.
But what about twins? They have then identical fingerprints.
Oh, you threw me a curve on that one. But they're
What
still, but
happens?
their retinas are going to be
What
different.
happens when there are twins?
But twins don't always mean that they have exact fingerprints.
Ah.
Their facial features, bone structures, but their eyes, their retinas are going to be different. Their eye colors can be almost an exact match or an exact match, but there are certain tall tale signs, that are unique to a human still, and
Mhm.
that is fingerprint and retina. And we
Interesting.
just don't utilize that. But I do know a lot more European countries are utilizing those biometrics.
Yes, we do. And the fingerprints.
Yeah, and here we don't, which again, I think you can say, well, there's certain freedoms, and is that going to be, big brother watching over you? Well, at the same time, if I'm doing where I want to do, which is do an investment migration, I don't want to have identity theft issues in my past that could have been avoided, um, due to using or some kind of biometric that would be very difficult to spoof, only unless it's hacked and replaced.
Mm. So
So,
we are in some ways still safe.
yes, I mean, biometrics are generally more secure than still doing passwords. They're not bulletproof, but when we look at facial recognition has accuracy issues across certain demographics, particularly skin tone and age. There's false positives and false negatives, which can lead to a detention or a denial, of of an individual. So reliability really increases when these tools are audited. So we'll go back to what we talked about earlier. Multi modalities, like combining eye and fingerprint, or even having it transparently tested. Do we show that these systems, have been tested by a third party for integrity, on a program? I think that governments want to always be kind of secretive, um, but at the same time, having some transparency to show that, hey, this system can't be fooled because this is the way that we do it, doesn't necessarily invite someone to try, but I think it's more of a deterrent, if you will.
Do you think that in the future There will be citizenships without the passport, basically just based on your biometrics. They scan you and they know which country you are a citizen of.
I think that we're halfway there. You look at Estonia, it has its e-residency. Blockchain based IDs, that's, I know there's resistance in the Western governments, but blockchain, that was the whole reason it was developed. Digital embassies are some of the early examples. So in the future, access to countries may be tokenized. We're seeing the use of tokens. I mean, the United States, this administration just started the whole tokenization, especially for tax or digital nomad purposes. Investment migration is, that's got it all written over that you can still be able to freely, without a necessarily a passport, be able to travel, become e-citizens, if you will. um, and all of that is done through blockchain IDs or some other kind of digitalization infrastructure. The one thing I'll end with on that is the challenge is going to be, can we anchor rights to something that's intangible like blockchain or digital?
Maybe someday in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's something to think about. But again, I'm going to go back to when I was doing some research on Estonia, and they're one of the leading individual countries that is trying this with blockchain. Um, that they are looking at those individual rights as well. So, what do you have a right to or not, depending on, that you're becoming a sovereign citizen of that nation, and yet you're coming, say, from the U.S., where you have certain other rights. Um, I think some of that is still going to be hashed out, but I think we're a lot farther into this or towards that ability, as you said, really to become a purely digital um, second citizen, than I think people give it credit to.
Wow, like a movie scenario. Already, we're not chipped, we're just scanned.
Yep. But I
Um,
mean, even the chips are coming, but they still rely on RFID, which, like a lot of our credit cards with that little chip in it, those are not purely digital, and that's why I kind of fall back onto that intangible, which is just digital, purely code, and not having to have a physical um, aspect to it.
Another topic I wanted to talk to you about, as we're talking about immigration and data security, um, we have to mention trafficking,
Mm.
human trafficking, and cybercrime. Uh, these trafficking networks, how are they using digital tools to exploit immigration systems?
Oh, yes. Human trafficking, sex trafficking, human slavery, doesn't matter which language you use. They exploit messaging apps. Social media, even social media ads, online job boards, and even dating platforms. It goes back to what I said earlier in the discussion of, these nefarious characters, they have 24/7 to think about ways to do everything. Um, we have to, as nations, employ authorities to do this. Well, that's not unlimited resources. You think human traffickers coupled with hacktivists have really unlimited resources because they're using people all around the world. Um, they're always upping their game within, say, their networks. They create fake visa assistance services. They exploit real immigration programs to smuggle victims. Um, Many also use crypto to finance and anonymize their operations. So I understand this is where, as a society, as a global society, we're starting to try to move towards more crypto or even the DeFi space. But governments don't necessarily always want that because it does have that dark side to it. Um, so how are they using these such things as messaging systems and social media ads more than just say social media? Because if you're in the know or you get introduced to these underworlds, it's certain languages that are, and I'm not talking about foreign languages. I'm talking about the way that the terminologies that are
So,
used
like
and
the
how
red flags to watch out for.
exactly, exactly. Just like there was here in the U.S., we had Wayfair, which is a company that does all home interior. So whether furniture or faux plants and such, that it was interesting to find an item that maybe cost $200 that was $25,000. And then the description didn't really meet the household item. It was because somebody actually was able to get into their online um, platform, their CRM, and they were able to change the information. Same thing with message apps, WhatsApp. Gosh, you have Panda, you have Signal, but there's dozens out there that claim to be these encrypted message apps. And who's able to watch all this? No nation. Um, sorry,
Sure.
no one nation or even allies are able to monitor this. And then you have your rights. It's human trafficking networks are something of a hard nut to crack, if you will.
But what can cybersecurity professionals do to disrupt these online trafficking routes? What can be done to minimize the risks or save somebody before it's too late?
Oh yeah. This is where I would say it's a whole society problem, and it's a problem that whole society can help solve. One, we're not going to be able to stop pedophilia. You have some countries, especially in Asia, who have very, very harsh law enforcement sanctions for any kind of sex trafficking, human trafficking. I think that's a deterrent. The cybersecurity aspect is there are organizations, there's always law enforcement. We can't throw enough resources at it to monitor the known or even start to understand the patterns of new communications that are being done. I think it's also parent education. It's society education of individuals, especially children, coming up so they don't get into those situations. Um, I don't think that when it comes to, say, conflicts throughout the world, that whole nations or whole organizations do enough to stop the exploitation. This is where you have hacktivists who are on the right side of doing good, look constantly to expose, report any kind of trafficking networks. And it works. But it's a 24/7 operation on both sides of playing cat and mouse.
But some countries are more exposed to these risks than others. There is human trafficking, I mean, sourcing of individuals to be trafficked in certain countries more than in others. So, to my knowledge, when there is immigration, countries that look at immigrants and the country of their origin, for some countries, there is already an alert.
Yeah. One, the cybersecurity professionals have, going back to what I was saying earlier, of mapping these networks. They're monitoring, and they do work with countries and authorities to help put together these notifications. Um, I would say 10 years ago, even maybe even 7 years ago, national law enforcement organizations within European and Western countries wanted to do the law enforcement themselves, the investigations themselves. But because we are a global society, we have this ability that we can, they've become more open to taking information on notices of, hey, be on the lookout. This third party is up to no good. They've already been arrested for pedophilia in this country. They served time and then they went back to their home country. Um, there are, like I said, whole organizations that do this on a daily basis, but people have to really train not only themselves but others. We just don't talk about it, and countries want to be able to trust other organizations, so they do a lot of maintaining third party relationships now. um, that I think is something that we didn't see 5, 10 years ago.
Oh, the dog is here. Um, are there any emerging technologies that can promise for secure and ethical mobility? Or will there be something like this in the future?
Hmm. Decentralized digital identity did systems. It uses the blockchain, and it really does show a lot of promise. Um, if people don't look at blockchain and understand how it's developed and how it's used, I always encourage people, go do your research. It what did does the system does is it gives users more control over your identity while maintaining that verifiability. Here, I know Norton has its LifeLock for individuals that, if I know Norton does have a platform that's global that works within different part of the privacy. It That is part of what a did system does. So it looks for any kind of privacy issues. It gives me, the user, the ability to verify that that was or was not me while protecting my identity. So privacy preserving AI has now come out, and AI within by 2030 will actually be more autonomous, almost autonomous. It will have surpassed human cognitive thinking. We're already to the point that we've passed what they call the Turing theory. It's an interesting theory after Alan Turing, the code breaker of World War II, and his computer, because it was set to try to unencrypt the encryption. But not only do we have the privacy preserving AI, we have homographic encryption and behavioral biometrics. So it understands the. So here's an example of behavioral biometrics is that it will understand when your eyes are in distress, when you fear, your eyes react different. Just like we know when we take lie detector tests, it has the heart rate and it has the perspiration because the flight or fright response. So these, if you think about it, these decentralized digital identity systems are going to really redefine how secure access without compromising freedom. And that's freedom of travel as well, freedom to do what we need to financially. And it's almost like it could knock down physical borders, but still maintain sovereign nations, sovereign citizenship as well.
Interesting. A very interesting field. I will definitely look into it more. Um, but what do you think that policymakers should do to prioritize this over the next 5 years? What can they do to secure borders without sacrificing freedom? And will they adapt to these kind of technologies on a legitimate level?
Oh, wonderful question. First and foremost, top priority, invest in cyber talent. Every nation, every workforce is behind on trained, knowledgeable, skilled cyber analysts. And I'm talking about the cyber analyst who sits at a phone center that you have to call when you say you locked yourself out of your network, all the way up to the CFO, the CEO, the CTO, the CIO, that they totally understand the infrastructure of their country, of a company, um, because they have to be able to enforce security by design. And again, this is part of this is for immigration technology, and it's able to adopt international standards for data sharing and privacy. I know that's what GDPR did a lot of. Here in the US we have a lot of our NIST stuff, NISTs. That's always what they're going to be looking at, is what are some of the um, best practices, the guides that we can do. There's reasons that we have privacy laws, like within the GDPR, what has to be included or not, because that's a protection of the consumer, but it's a protection of information. So they all have to future proof border systems without building digital walls that exclude any kind of real policy that has privacy sharing restrictions, or even privacy itself that restricts it. But we also don't want it open.
Great. So, cyber talent is really necessary.
It is. Throughout the world, I've checked out a couple of Russian, British, German, and Italian cybersecurity boot camps. I teach cybersecurity here in the US, even Israeli companies. They all have different perspectives, but they all teach really the same thing, and they all say the same thing. Cybersecurity talent is woefully underemployed. Um, we just can't catch up with knowledgeable, skilled workforces. If we had this in place, I think we would see a much safer digital world, um, because then we could be on counteroffensive rather than always trying to be being reactive to someone trying to get into a network or steal information.
So, from which industries would you think that somebody could transition into cybersecurity in the most efficient, fastest way? If there is lack of these kind of talents, there must be some kind of synergy between cybersecurity and another field.
Um, There really isn't. I've had individuals who were CPAs, certified public accountants, economics. I've had people who, worked at a restaurant who were servers or hostesses. But I've also had people who came out of college with computer science degrees. Computer science degrees don't teach you cybersecurity. Um, the fast track are what they call the boot camps. These are usually 6 or 8 week long crash courses on everything from the very beginnings. So I wouldn't say that there's one other industry or even several that would fast track you into a cybersecurity um, job or even make you kind of that quintessential great individual. Now, if you have a background, just general interest on how to do things within the cybersecurity realm, but never really thought about doing actual cybersecurity, that would probably be the best person. Now, I have had those kind of students that they said, no, always just dabbled in trying to, and they never want to say it out loud, but I've tried my hand at hacking, my own network, my own internet company, or my neighbor, um, and so they have at least that on their own through their general osmosis of they have that idea of one being inquisitive, two being very meticulous and understanding that cybersecurity, as you get into certain facets, is very detailed. It's complex. It's part coding sometimes, so Python um, coding as well, because you're going to be told you've got to look at these thousands of lines of code and figure out, how did this hacker do this? How did they change somebody's name and date of birth to falsify a passport? You know, so on and so forth. So it's not a, it's a great question, one that I don't see has a very easy answer.
Hmm. Well, thank you. There is a lot to think about, but it does help. If you're interested in the field, then you will make it work. You will put in
Yes.
the effort to learn everything about it.
Yes, and that's the thing. You put in that energy, you're going to get a lot more out of it.
When it comes to the future, where do you see the next big cyber immigration flashpoint globally?
Oh, again, I'm going to go back to my previous life, and even within today's global conflicts. You're going to see a lot of it within refugee resettlement systems, conflict areas, failed states. We've seen that as well, not only within Europe, but even coming from like North Africa after Libya failed, more than a decade ago. Ukraine, unfortunately, and even the surrounding countries that have brought in refugees. We have seen kind of the fraud happening, and I think that's going to continue. We really have to, and one of the areas that I think is going to stop a lot of that are those biometric databases. So while the cyber immigration flashpoint could be a resettlement system run by, whether it's a country, a nation, or something like the United Nations, biometric databases, those being built in unstable regions is going to be huge. Um, Also, watching for state sponsored misinformation programs. North Korea, China, Iran run those a lot. They target migration policies, but they run them against the EU and the United States. So I think really watching that, and I think that the United States is trying to clean that up. We've seen some individual countries within the European Union taking it upon themselves to understand the migration system and the flaws.
Yes, interesting. But I'm very hopeful when it comes to investment migration, and I think that it can be a solution to a number of problems. Do you see any way how investment migration as an industry can become part of that solution?
Oh, yeah, by becoming leaders in secure data stewardship. That's going to be number one. Just as we said, what are the, what's the top priority for policymakers? One, having the talent, two, having the infrastructure, and then having that, because that's all going to lead to the more data stewardship, and it's going to be secured, having programs that adopt rigorous cyber protocols and transparency. Now, I know a lot of misconception when we say transparency is, well, throw open the doors and show us your programs. No, it's about talking about it. It's there is more um, transparency here under the what we call CISA, um, and they put out daily, if not hourly, reports of vulnerabilities of computer systems, whether it's, and it goes well beyond Microsoft or the Mac, Apple, but it does phones and it does very specific computer programs for companies that they've employed. If they have a multinational corporation, they want to protect their data. So they can have all these protocols in place, and they know that each day they are bombarded with possible hacking events. But it's that transparency of understanding what are the vulnerabilities. So this can help really define global best practices so everybody's on the same page rather than being seen as there's loopholes for bad actors. Here are the good things that need to be patched, not just that identifying a loophole.
But what could we do now? What could we do in global mobility at this very moment to improve cyber resilience?
Embed cyber resilience into the DNA of every migration system. What do I mean? I mean, from the agent training all the way to the application architecture. Um, we talked about early on about the United Kingdom's UKA, and so it wants a copy of your passport. It wants, and it's gathering its architecture is, yes, being able to put together well enough in advance who you are, who's coming in. That's part of the ingrained DNA into their migration system. It's collecting the name, your travel, because it's also going to share information. So assume one is going to be coming and prepare for it. There's going to be a 0 day, which is a breach. um, I haven't heard of our whole immigration system here in the US being hacked, but I've heard of, yes, I've been part of whole federal government organizations being hacked. Like, my name is out there because I've worked for several organizations throughout my lifetime. Um, but that's because there wasn't this cyber resilience. And that is what's going to help the migration systems. And I wouldn't put it beyond that. When migration systems, when nations can show their system is not impenetrable, but is one of the safest and has your personally identifiable information uh, protection first and foremost, because they train their people. They train industry individuals like yourself, all the way up to their computer systems, their application architectures. Uh, I can see that already happening.
Well, in that case, it's all about securing everything. I'm sure this is a very interesting field, not just to me, but also to the people that are watching this or will be watching this, and that you will probably be a person somebody will want to get in touch with to learn more about this field. So, could you provide us with some information how to reach out to you, where to find you?
Yes, of course. I can always be reached through my website, www.drcharlesrusso.com. It's drcharlesrusso.com. And then there's a message system. I am on LinkedIn. I am very active on LinkedIn. So the message system, anytime someone has a question about any kind of discipline that I've talked about, please reach out to me. Those are probably the two best ways. I love to be able to contribute to any kind of cybersecurity, national security, um, publications or anything like that. And those two, again, drcharlesrusso.com and my LinkedIn profile.